necessary and so on time. And long live that spirit of the Black Panther Party, the original Black Panther Party for self-defense, because it was necessary and it was on point.
All right.
And I'm so glad that Michael said the Black Panther Party for self-defense, because the Black Panther Party originally got together because of police criminality in the Black community, in particular to Oakland, but it was happening all around the country. So what we notice today with these police murders, with this police brutality and police assault, is nothing new. Huey P. Newton and the brothers that assisted him, Bobby Seale, and all the young brothers and sisters that came around to organize the Black Panther Party did so because they recognized the criminality of police departments in Oakland, California. Police murders, police assaults, false arrests, et cetera, et cetera. As Michael stated, they then expanded to a whole lot of other services for our community, the breakfast program, et cetera, et cetera. But their primary objective was to take a position against police brutality. Black Panther Party for self-defense, not self-offense. A lot of times after the fact, a lot of individuals wanted to portray the Black Panther Party as an organization, a criminal organization that's just like attacking police officers, but they were defending our community, and that's why they had the name Black Panther Party for self-defense. So big kudos to all the brothers and sisters who put their lives on the line in defense of our community.
And one thing also is that concept of the Black Panther Party had extended outside of Oakland, California. There were members, I know members of, and they were in New York, they were part of the Black Panther Party and fought that same fight to ensure the self-defense and the uplifting of our community. So big ups to all the members of the Black Panther Party. And because I know people that are still with us today, they were part of that fight and that movement. Right. Big ups to them. Also, Mike, on 10/15/1996, the passing of Robert F. Williams.
Yes, what a strong brother. Robert F. Williams, born in Monroe, North Carolina, and shout out to my family that's down there in North Carolina, near Monroe and Charlotte. Want to just say for the record that Robert F. Williams was such a great man who in the 1950s was heading the NAACP, which was doing good things in the community at that time. And he was their leader throughout the 50s, but in the early 60s, when police tactics in that area became so heavy-handed and they were just killing people outright, he formed a way. He formed a way with people to arm themselves. He got a charter, what's called a charter, from the National Rifle Association, and formed the gun club, and therefore raised the consciousness to arm that community, to arm itself. In the early days, he had fought to get a pool, which was no lightweight thing to get, because you could not swim in the same pools with white people. So he fought for a library as the head of the NAACP in that area and fought for a pool. But later on, he expanded and grew and developed and had to ultimately leave the country to Cuba, also to China. Was able to meet his wife at United African Movement. She came through and spoke on his behalf. So just want to say that the world was a better place having Robert F. Williams, who was a great inspiration to all of us.
All right. Michael, also on 10/16/1995, the Million Man March.
Yeah, well, the Million Man March, I'm sure we would all have something to say because we never seen anything quite like it. This was a formation where Black men from all over the country and maybe from even out of the country came to Washington, D.C. in 1995 at the call of the Most Honorable Louis Farrakhan. And our Minister Farrakhan had men's only meetings all over the country, which some people are not aware of. These men's only meetings eventually led up to the Million Man March. The Spirit of God touched Minister Farrakhan's heart. And this is what came out of that. The move, and he was not even aware that he was planning on calling it, but I think that the way he just was traveling from city to city with men's only meetings, talking to brothers, trying to talk to make people better, to improve them in terms of whether as a parent, whether as a man, whether to be inspired to work, whether it's being inspired to restore relationships with your family, or people that you might not even be talking to or haven't visited in a while. All these things, just the whole tenor and tone of the Million Man March was to make you a better human being and certainly make you more conscious of the Black community and to bring the Black family together under one roof. So big ups to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan for doing that. No other Black leader in this country could have brought 2 million people to Washington, D.C. Like he did. And it wasn't even a weekend. It was a weekday. And to do that on a weekday was incredible. So big ups to him. And certainly, I'm sure his teacher, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, approved of him calling that and representing the nation like he did.
Yes, it was definitely a phenomenal event. It was a phenomenal spiritual, beneficial day. It was, as Michael said, the gathering of over 2 million Black men, primarily Black men. And the only reason why it was successful was because of Black radio and Black personalities who pushed it. You know, there was, if I know you remember, Mike and Julian, that prior to the event, white media had muted promoting it. You heard nothing on white radio, white TV. It was total silence. But Black radio personalities, Bob Law, Tony Brown, individuals like Donald Shields, Reverend Shields in New York City, pushed the concept of the Million Man March and promoted it and encouraged brothers to attend this event. So I always use that date and that event as a demarcation for the ratification and dismantling of Black radio. I think that enemies who sat back and observed the power and the influence that these personalities had, you know, to encourage and to ignite and inform us, they took note of that. And ever since that point, and years later, you've seen less and less, fewer and fewer Black radio stations, Black radio programs, Black television programs. And, you know, this may be the world according to Noel Leader, but I always use that mark as a point when I look at the dismantling of effective Black radio stations, which today we basically have none, at least in New York. And I think we'd be less than naive to think that the enemies of Black elevation, the enemies of Black unity, didn't sit back and say, listen, how can one man make a call for Black people from all around the country to come and meet in Washington, D.C. on a weekday, and they come? Listen, the enemies of our people didn't take that as a small thing. That was very significant to them, and that was very problematic to them. So it was a monumental event, a phenomenal event for us and for our community. And blessings and praise go to Minister Louis Farrakhan for making the call, and for all those brothers who came out and all the sisters who supported us. But I always looked at it and I always took note of what happened afterwards as it relates to the dismantling on those individuals who helped Farrakhan to bring 2 million Black men to Washington, D.C.
And that just goes to tell you how important Black media was and is important to our community. You know, it's unfortunate, like you said, Noel, it was a real attack and a dismantling of Black media. But I don't want to reiterate what you guys said, you know, excellent points. And I just wanted to say that right now we have our YouTube live community on. So you guys want to comment, discuss some of the things that we talk about, write to us. We'll try to respond as we take note to the comments that you guys make relative to our conversations. I wanted to talk about some things that we talked about in the past. First, Noel, Amy Cooper, the white woman in Central Park who called the police on a black man who was bird watching while she was walking her dog, her dog wasn't on a leash. He requested that she put her dog on a leash. I know you wanted to comment about that topic, Noel. Go.
Right. Just to update our family, especially those of you who are not in New York City, the district attorney revealed that she made actually 2 false calls to 911 to the police, making accusations saying that this black man was attacking her when in all essence he was not. So the district attorney in Manhattan has decided to charge her with a misdemeanor for falsely reporting an incident. I don't anticipate her being locked up. She'll probably get public, service, some hours of community service. But we just wanted to update our community that she is being charged and prosecuted for a misdemeanor in that particular case. And I think all these instances where white women and others have made false calls on African-American men in particular, and children and women as well, should be charged and prosecuted. So we'll keep the family updated on that particular case.
Okay, absolutely. Also, Michael, another update, the Breonna Taylor case. There was a investigation into the shooting by the investigators in Louisville of her murder, her killing. But at the same time, they opened up an investigation into her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, into his background. Now, he was not involved in any criminality at the time. They should have been solely investigating the shooting because that's what they were assigned to investigate. But at the same time, they opened up an investigation into his background. And one thing that we know about the police department, whenever they're involved in shootings, whenever they're involved in some type of misconduct, they always open investigations into the victim of those particular crimes by the police. And in order to cover up the police department, in order to protect the police image, because, as I always say, the police department is in the business of protecting the police department. That is problematic for me. And I think that there should be some accountability when the police department attempts to either A, sway public opinion, or B, soil the reputation of victims when they are actually the people who are the criminals in these particular cases. And I know, Michael, you wanted to talk about something related to the case as well.
Yeah, just wanted to just say for the record that quite a few people asked me why did I juxtapose Daniel Cameron, who's the Attorney General of Kentucky, with Robert Abrams, who was the New York State Attorney General under Mario Cuomo. Well, I did that because they did similar things. Now, in the case with Daniel Cameron, which we talked about, you saw how he was able to justify not charging the police officers in the death of Breonna Taylor merely because of a warning shot, which he claimed was shot at the officer. Consequently, everything goes. So he's saying that their behavior was justified. Consequently, no review of their conduct should be administered because of that warning shot. Now, that's what he used. And he led people from the truth, where he is supposed to be the finder of facts, the finder of the truth. He was able to negotiate his way out of being that, the finder of facts. Now, in the case of Robert Abrams, he did the same thing because we're talking about an outdated grand jury process. Robert Abrams could have asked the pertinent questions, which would have charged 6 white men with the rape and abduction, kidnap of Tawana Brawley. he had the very mailman who saw her abduction in the grand jury process. He did not ask, did you see Tawana Brawley abducted, pulled into a vehicle and whisked off? He didn't ask him that. He asked him about her address delivering to mail in her area that she lived. He did not ask the question about, because the information was there, about her description of the vehicle and characters of the license plate, which he saw. So that information would have led to an indictment of the very people involved, district attorney, an ADA, the son who was the head person of the state police, his son was involved. So it was just so law enforcement and lawyers, powerful white men involved in her rape, and he was able to exclude them from an investigation by not asking the person who saw it. So this is why I said what Cameron did a couple of weeks ago is no different than what Robert Abrams did. Robert Abrams was able to write a report after the grand jury. He wrote a report saying that the grand jury called the Tawana Brawley matter a hoax, said it was concocted. Well, he left out the fact that a police officer shortly after that, Harry Chris, was killed. Now, how do you overlook that? He was killed by the very people who raped Tawana Brawley because he was a weak link. He had guilty feelings. He was weak and he wasn't as callous and cold as the rest of them because he did not follow his orders, which was to kill her. After they raped her over a 3-day period, they were supposed to kill her, put her in the garbage bag, put her in the garbage receptacle so that when those big trucks just back up and just turn the thing over and flip it into the big truck, you would have never seen or heard from Tawana Brawley again. But the last minute, he bailed out and refused to do it. Consequently, Robert Abrams did not inquire into Harry Chris' death, even though he was mentioned as one of the people involved. So you had to do so much dirt to keep their names out of this, and he in turn attacked the Tawana Brawley's family, the mother and the aunt Juanita. He attacked both of them and attacked Tawana Brawley too, and even put out a warrant for Tawana Brawley's arrest, a 15-year-old girl who was raped. Now, he was able to say it's a hoax because the white man has always said that anytime a black woman accused a white man of rape, it's always been a hoax. She's always lying. Yet look at all of us. If you look at all of us in a room when we all get together, we're every complexion under the sun. White men have been raping us, raping black women for centuries, and raping black men too. But that's a whole nother conversation right now, because that history is there too. You know, the little children during slavery time, and even after that, that was allegedly bed warmers. That's a whole history. But again, Robert Abrams systematically was able to get these prominent white folks who was tight with Governor Mario Cuomo. They knew him personally, and he was able to exonerate them the same way Daniel Cameron was able to exonerate the people involved in the death of Breonna Taylor.
All right. Noel, we were talking earlier about these white militias, and there's been a lot of reports in the media of some instances of these militias showing up at protests, and there's been a multitude of things, and even relative to the threats and attempted kidnapping of a governor. What about these threats from these white militia groups?
Well, one of the things that we talked about on this program ad nauseum is that the FBI has stated that these so-called white militia groups, these so-called right-wing extremist groups, which I call terrorist organizations, have been encouraged to have their members join law enforcement agencies throughout the country. And there's a video out that's making its way on YouTube where members of one of these terrorist organizations, not militias, not extremist groups, but terrorist organizations. That's how they should be categorized. That's how they should be described. They have gone on record by saying that if Donald Trump loses this election, that there's going to be civil war. They have made threats on the internet, on YouTube, saying that they're telling their members to arm up, and that if Donald Trump loses this particular election, that they're going to be a lot of response by their members. I can categorize these individuals as terrorist groups and terrorist organizations because of the threat that they've made to the American public, and I don't understand why they haven't. Those individuals who have made these threats are not rounded up and arrested. We talked about the Black Panther Party of self-defense when we opened up the program, and the Black Panther Party was targeted by the FBI. The Black Panther Party was targeted by every law enforcement agency throughout the nation where there was a chapter. Yet these organizations, these groups, categorized in the white media by law enforcement agencies as militias or extremist group or far-right groups, they're terrorist organizations, and they've made threats of bodily harm against other American citizens if Donald Trump loses. And I think it's preposterous that they're not rounded up as they was done in the Black Panther, as members of the Black Panther Party, that they're not rounded up, or if Muslims, had made similar threats to American people. And I ask you and Mike, can you imagine if a group of an organization of Muslims have made similar threats to the American public, saying that if this didn't happen or if that didn't happen, they were going to arm up their members and call for a civil war in America? Can you imagine what would happen to these members, to these organizations? So I think it's preposterous, Julian, that organizations such as the Boogaloo Boys, the Proud Boys, and other terrorist organizations, not far-right groups or militias or extremist groups, terrorist organizations are allowed to make terroristic threats against the American public, and they're not rounded up and arrested.
Yeah, but see, Noel, part of the problem I have with this is the connection that these groups, these terrorists, have with law enforcement. They have connections with law enforcement. Just recently, there was a shooting of someone who was part of the Black Lives Matter movement by a security officer who was hired by I think it was a news outlet, and they shot a person as he was protesting. There was a confrontation between the two. He pulls out his gun, the security officer, an armed guard who was not licensed, but hired by a company, and killed someone who was part of a protest. So the connection with law enforcement and what we would think would be a legal and reputable member of society, such as a news organization, are hiring people who have relationships, who are part of these particular so-called militias, terrorist organizations, and who have a philosophy that goes along with these particular groups, are involved in some of the normal operations of our society, albeit law enforcement and so-called legal security. Mike?
Well, certainly I would just add to that the fact that whether it's Proud Boys, Rise Above movement, Boogaloo, Wolverines, all these various types, they are not investigated fully, even though the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, has said they represent the greatest threat to America. Consequently, you have a situation where they are allowed to grow, develop, and recruit, whether online or offline, have major meetings, train in some cases on army bases. And then when they do ultimately kill black folks, they don't do a real investigation to find out who their affiliates are. Let's see what they do in this particular case, since it involved a sitting governor who's white, by the way, as well as a governor in Virginia who's also white. Now, the sheriff, it was interesting that the sheriff has been caught being a part of the Wolverines. And he said he knows them. He just shook it off casually by saying he knows them and they're friends. And then he was asked point blank about them conspiring to capture and kill a sitting governor. And he said, well, maybe they were going to arrest her, a citizen's arrest. Now, where did that come from? He said maybe they were going to arrest her. Maybe they viewed her actions in shutting down stores, shutting down businesses because of COVID-19. He said maybe her actions were unconstitutional. Consequently, they decided on making a citizen's arrest. This is coming from a sheriff who's knee deep in all of this. For him to have the temerity to say something like that, there should be automatic demands. Had this been a black group and a black sheriff went to defend them by saying maybe they view that governor's actions as unconstitutional, consequently they decided to make a citizen's arrest, that not only would that black sheriff be vilified, they would come after him, all the forces in that state as well as in other states, and his law enforcement career would be short-lived. Consequently, he has been able to get around all of this. The other sheriff who was talking about black folks should not be able to produce children, that they should be warehoused. He still has a job. He did a full press conference where he went through a cacophony of reasons why black people should not be allowed to mass produce. And he was talking about how they should be warehoused, and even the operation, whatever the name of the operation, to stop a woman from being able, a hysterectomy, whatever it is, and the same thing with the male genitals. Consequently, he was suggesting things that you heard about going on in Germany. And yet he maintains his job. So I would just say that white supremacy reigns supreme, and they will not, I dare say right now in these early stages, they will not do a real intrusive investigation into these individuals and their associates.
Well, Michael, one of the things that the FBI has determined through the investigation is that a lot of these white supremacist groups are infiltrating law enforcement entities. They are infiltrating police departments and even the FBI. So when we see these, and I'm going to use this term, when we see these law enforcement sympathizers, I think it's even deeper than just being sympathizers when it comes to being part of these militias and their ideology. I think that they are supporters. I think that they are sometimes even members, and they allow these groups to function and operate under the safety of law enforcement, under the protection of law enforcement within some of these locations. And I think that's very problematic. But if we don't have a Justice Department, the FBI, or an investigative entity that is going to seriously investigate these groups and hold them accountable and have thorough and collective investigations, then this is going to implode within these departments and within this government, as we see when they talk about kidnapping and killing a sitting governor.
Well, just remember and consider the president of the United States of America. He weighed in on it. He texted or tweeted, liberate Michigan to them, and had the temerity to tell a sitting governor to negotiate with armed domestic terrorists. That's what they are, armed domestic terrorists. And he told, hey, can you imagine white men going into a state capitol armed, and then you tell the governor to negotiate with them? Well, he's part and parcel. So this is why I say that since he is the titular head of America, he's the head of the Justice Department, he's the head of the FBI. When you really look at it, President Trump, he meaning President Trump. Consequently, whatever investigation will happen will be compromised because he holds the director of the FBI job in his hand. He holds the attorney general's job in his hand. Consequently, he can have these investigations compromised. And yet he has the nerve to throw shade at the governor and then take credit. In other words, he reminded the governor, you didn't save yourself. He said it was my Justice Department that saved you. Well, they saved her in spite of him, not because of him. And because when the attorney general was asked about it, he said he didn't know anything about it. Consequently, it was those FBI agents on their own initiative doing their own job, which they're supposed to do, that captured these individuals, all 13 of them.
Right, yes, and that's what I wanted to mention. There was 13 individuals recently arrested for conspiracy to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, who's the governor of Michigan. They had plotted and planned to kidnap her. They had plotted to take out Ralph Northam, who's the governor of Virginia, and also to kill police officers, all under the guise of initiating a civil war. That was their probably objective. These individuals are alleged to come from the militia called Wolverines, right. And it's a terrorist organization. I don't even like the term militia. You know, right in lines with groups like Al-Qaeda or ISIS, you know, but these individuals are described as far-right groups or militias, et cetera, and they're terrorist organizations. So this week, 13 individuals was arrested in an attempt to kidnap the governor of Michigan. And as Michael said, the Barry County Sheriff, Dar Leaf, when asked questions about this particular incident, made statements that because he was previously caught on stage with some of these individuals that were involved in this particular plan during an American Patriot rally that they had. And he had said they had been nice to me and respectful. He said a lot of people are angry with the governor and want her arrested. And so they had, you know, so maybe they were trying to make a citizen's arrest, you know, so he's questioned the fact that this might not have been a kidnapping, as Michael stated. So in other words, he's offering an excuse. He's a sympathizer. And as you stated, Julian, many individuals, unfortunately, in law enforcement around the nation are sympathizers with these white extremist terrorist organizations and their members. And as I stated, that's how they have to be defined and described, but frequently they aren't in the white press and in the white media. They are terrorists, and they are threatening the American public with death and physical and bodily harm. As Michael stated earlier, the FBI has concluded that they're a threat to this country. Yet the response by law enforcement organizations from the highest FBI on down to local police jurisdictions are not strong enough in response to these individuals. I stated earlier, as we talked about the Black Panther Party, or you have to look at the COINTELPRO that was organized by J. Edgar Hoover and FBI against members of the Black Panther Party to neutralize them or to take them out. And they were very effective. But as it relates to these terrorist organizations in this country who are publicly, repeatedly walking around with AR-15s and dangerous weapons. These individuals walk around free, spewing hatred, threats, and there's the response by law enforcement entities is minuscule. So I think it's very problematic. We'll see how this particular case is going to filter through of the rest of these 13 individuals. As Michael said, the response from the president is not sufficient, and it wasn't strong. It definitely wasn't strong. And but I think our community, ought to be alarmed. I think those leaders in our community, be it elected, social, political leaders in our community, ought to be more vocal against these organizations, these terrorist organizations and their members. And I think that we ought to have to be vigilant in terms of organizing and responding to what they're threatening throughout this nation.
Noel, I have to adamantly disagree with you, brother. Adamantly. You said that the FBI isn't strong enough. Oh, they're strong enough. And I believe they're strong enough. They just don't have the desire. They don't have the will, and they don't have I'm trying to think of another word, but I'll leave it at the desire and will to conduct these investigations, because they have the tools, they have the investigators, they have everything they need to conduct thorough investigations into these groups, to make the arrest, to develop a strong enough case. They have everything they need. As you stated, they murdered members of the Black Panther Party, and they didn't conduct an investigation where they were going to make arrests. But in these particular cases, they have obtained enough information to conduct arrest, prosecution, and sentences in these particular cases. So I think that they have the strength. They just don't have the desire.
Well, let me quickly say that I don't think I said they're not strong enough. I think I said the response is not strong enough. But if I said they're not strong enough, surely I know they are. And it's not a lack of, so you're not disagreeing with me.
Right.
If I said something incorrectly, which I thought I said, that the response is not strong enough, because they definitely have the tool. They just don't have the will. They can do it. They just don't want to do it because and my position is that there's a lot of sympathy and empathy with these white extremist terrorist organizations. And if past history has shown us anything, it has shown us that members of these federal law enforcement agencies are even members themselves of some of these organizations. By some of the past practices, we have proof of that. So I think our community ought to be very much alarmed by the open threat from these terrorist organizations.
Well,
yeah, brother, I was just saying that I disagree with you in jest. Just to add a little.
I know, but I just want the audience to know.
Add a little levity to our discussion.
Well,
Mike, I know you wanted to say something.
Just for the record, Dylan Roof was involved in these type of organizations, and certainly no one can forget that he killed 9 people in church during Bible study. You can't forget that, and certainly that level of involvement also pertains to the federal building in the mid-90s, 94, 95, that was bombed in Oklahoma, was done by direct members, the Proud Boys. So you're talking about an organization that spans probably at least 30 years or more, and they've been allowed to exist even after having bombed the federal building in response to what happened in Texas. So I would just say that, again, you have a situation where there's a lack of real, true investigations and making arrests that's involving these domestic terrorists.
Well, Michael, and one of the things that I've noticed is that these guys are connected. These militias and these domestic terrorists, they are connected. They were reaching out to other groups to assist them in their plot against this governor. So, we can't think that this, and I don't want our audience to think that these are a group of 20, 30 guys that decided to get together, form what they want to consider a militia. This is a collective operation There are people that are in different states that they communicate together. They have the same philosophies. They have a very big connection on the internet where they exchange information, where they talk about their events and their philosophies. So this is not just a group of 20 or 30 so-called militias or people that are involved in the militia that are operating from these positions. This is a well-connected group of individuals who have a internet connection and a social connection as well. And when I say social, I mean through social media.
Well, yeah, and they're not only well connected, they're well financed. And the fact of the matter is, not only do you get support from the POTUS, President of the United States, but also when you consider that even in their disagreements, they're all together. Now, all these various organizations, domestic terrorists, armed militias, they are different, but they come together under one banner at certain times. Some of them are more clan type organizations. They're training for black folks. You get the other organizations, some of them, they're white supremacists. They're all white supremacists, but some of them are getting ready to defend against the federal government. Why? Because the federal government, that's that old fight going back to the Civil War, states' rights. So they do not want to be told what to do by a central government. The central government, obviously, that meets in Washington, D.C. So they're different, but they're together. When all is said and done, they're together. Whether you are a Nazi type organization, whether you're a white supremacist like the KKK, White Citizens Council, those types, Proud Boys, Boogaloo, they're all basically the same when all is said and done. They're domestic terrorists.
Right. All right, Michael. I just wanted to bring this story up. Two white guys in Mississippi, they tried to shoot black teens while they were riding ATVs.
Yeah, it is a road in Mississippi where in Yazoo County where people take buggies, horses, ATVs, and they have fun on that road. Two white men, father and son team, Wade Oscar Twiner, he was 48, and his son Lane Twiner, who's 22. Both of them were in the vehicle in a truck and tried to run them down. The teenagers, black teenagers, tried to bump them off the road, pulled out a weapon and started shooting at them. It scared the teens to death. They thought they was going to die. And the sheriff in that county says that according to him, he is not sure if he's going to implement charges based on race. He said he doesn't have enough evidence, but there's never enough evidence when you're dealing with sheriffs and major police departments, agencies, and intelligence gatherers. If the person does not call you the N-word or make a racial epithet, they have a convenient way of not making those charges stick. So they just stick with the crime itself, and they don't characterize these things as hate crimes.
Mm. And I think that's preposterous. We spoke about that last week on another instance where hate crimes weren't charged. And for our viewing audience, if they don't know, when you charge the additional hate crimes to whatever felony, be it murder or assault, it brings additional punitive measures. And that was the reason why we have hate crime legislation. So unfortunately, in far too many of these instances, jurisdictions have made the decision, based on I don't know what, not to charge the additional hate crime. And that's what it's there for, to protect victims who are victimized primarily because of race, religion, sexual orientation, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's preposterous. And I think far too often we're seeing these additional hate charges not added to these crimes.
Right. And they always talk about new legislation, they always talk about new laws that they put forth, but if they have a hate crime statute and they're not utilizing the statute when it's apropos, when it's appropriate, then it's for naught. These people are responding and utilizing whatever crimes they are, which are based on a racist or hate crime statute, and they're not charging these guys with it. So yeah, that's definitely a problem. What I wanted to do was recognize some of the or one of our viewers from YouTube Live. Noel, I'll give this question to you. Jazz Explorer asks, are there Black officers connected, and do they have a voice? Just like these white officers are connected, do Black officers, are they connected, and do they have a voice that they can utilize under these circumstances?
Yes, there's a litany of Black organizations throughout the country. We know we have our sister Cheryl Dorsey in California. We have DeLacy Davis in New Jersey. We have 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Care in New York City. We have our sister, her name escapes me right now, and forgive me, in Philadelphia. So you have a number of Black organizations. Of course, what our family needs to understand is that the number of Black police officers in many of these agencies are minuscule. And I'm not talking about majority Black cities. I'm talking about places like New York. A lot of times when you look at photographs of police officers gathered, you may see one Black out of 20 police officers. So although there are many Black organizations, because in these agencies, Black officers experience racism at the hand of white police officers. So don't believe that we're all blue. There's many problems. So Blacks have been forced, like we have been forced to organize 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Care. So yes, there are Black organizations. They're not as strong as some of these white fraternities, these white groups, because their numbers are not that high. And that's why I say that anybody talking about police reform, at the top of the list of police reform is the mandate that police agencies and police department reflect the community that they serve. There's always been an attempt to keep the number of Blacks that join these agencies down, and that's preposterous. And I think that would increase the strength of Black fraternal police organizations throughout the country if their ranks, the numbers in the ranks increase. So yes, there are Black organizations out the nation, but their membership a lot of times is not as strong as other individuals.
And I also think that a lot of these Black law enforcement officers need a separate support system. A lot of times they are attached, like in New York, they're attached to the PBA, who's responsible for certain aspects of whether it's their medical or whether it's certain things that the union supplies police officers. When we talk about representation, there's not a balance in representation that the Black officers get from the PBA as white officers get. And I've spoken to a few Black officers who feel like when they need support from their union and union attorneys, that they don't get the same support that white officers get. And I think that's part of the problem as well.
Well, I concur, and I'll buttress the point by saying that to the viewer that there's a significant difference in unions, police unions, and fraternal orders. The difference is as big as night and day. You have to remember, unions, they have contracts with the city. They have a fundraising mechanism. They have agreements with respect to discipline, with respect to hiring. They have contracts in terms of salary and all these relationships, and have relationships with elected officials. So the power of a union cannot be underestimated. So when you take that in consideration of a fraternal order, which technically has no standing other than they exist. So you have fraternal orders all over the country. But however, there's a big difference when you have contractual connections with the city, with the mayor, and you actually enter in those negotiations in terms of salary and other things that are afforded to the union. So some mayors have broke unions by disallowing their ability to gather funds and other ingenious ways to break the backs of unions. So as you go further south, you'll see that they are not unions. That's why the FOP, Fraternal Order Police, is so strong, because it connects all of those police agencies that do not have a union. They will be the union for them. So just take that into consideration, and maybe some people won't be as harsh on Black individuals that are in these agencies, because you don't have the same connection that the Irish and Italians have. You just don't, because these unions that were formed, many of them well over 100, 150 years ago, there's a whole different mindset with respect to everything, from the way they recruit, from the way they gather funds, and the way they politically arm themselves and become powerful. So there's a big difference. And one little note to add to that would be, I remember quite vividly in a courtroom when Peter Del Debbio, a white police officer, shot Desmond Robinson, putting 5 rounds in his back. By God's grace, Desmond Robinson did not die. And the PBA was dead set against Desmond Robinson because he allowed the district attorney to actually charge Peter Del Debbio. And he could have stopped it, but he decided to go along with the charges because the charges was right. Del Debbio was trying to kill him. By those additional 2 rounds, he shot him with 3 rounds in the back. When Desmond Robinson went down, he stood over him with a 5-shot revolver and put those last 2 rounds in his back. And the PVA stood for the white police officer who was off duty at the time. Desmond Robinson was on duty, and they had no problem standing by the white officer. So, and Giuliani stood by the white officer because he tried to get a photo op with Desmond Robinson, though highly narcotized and sedated in a hospital, tried to bring those two together and then just say they were buddies and that it was just 2 good guys trying to do a job. So I'm saying that when all is said and done, the unions will always be more powerful than fraternal orders.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Very quickly, we have one story. I'm gonna try to get to this story real quick. A Texas man wore blackface to fool witnesses during a murder of his ex-girlfriend. Texas man name is Andrew Charles Beard, and he was arrested on Monday after killing his 24-year-old girlfriend, Alyssa Burkett. Now, the way he was caught was in his car. He had a device to track her particular car. And when the police did their investigation, they found this device, and they also found a black foundation, a liquid foundation that he used to cover his face. Now, when he used this liquid to cover his face, there were 2 witnesses who saw the shooting of his girlfriend because he went to her job and murdered her, stabbed her, and shot her. The 2 witnesses saw him in blackface, and they assumed that it was a black person who committed the murder. And this is the information they gave to the police. Now, this story isn't anything new. This is the first time that they attempted to, or someone has attempted to commit a crime and pose or put the crime on a black person. But I just want our audience to understand that this is not going away. We have to be very vigilant and make sure that we don't always fall into these traps that they try to put forth as these crimes being committed by black folks.
And we've seen a lot of that, Julian, with the Black Lives Matter protests. You know, there's been a number of white individuals who are supposed to be sympathizers with the Black Lives Matter movement. When they were arrested for committing an assortment, a number of crimes, it was discovered that they were white men in black masks. So that's as you stated, just not a new phenomenon. It's a troubling phenomenon because I haven't heard too many instances when it's been reversed, where a Black individual committed a crime with a white mask on. So it's something that, I think I personally believe it's an uptick in white people utilizing Black masks in order to commit crimes. And, so it just is nothing new, as you stated, Julian.
Right, and that's just adds to the criminalization of our community. They have this mindset, and they want to put in the mindset, and even in the minds of some of our people, that Blacks are the ones that are committing the bulk of the crimes, and that there's such a heinous group of Black folks that are committing crimes. But like you said, Noel, I agree there's an uptick. But we've run out of time, so we're going to go to our closing statements. Noel?
Yeah, I just want to say in a few seconds, though, it's one thing when you commit a crime to try to hide who you are, but it's totally another different thing when you try to change your race to make it appear as if somebody of another race committed a crime. Lenny Lou, Kitty Cat, I love you. Little Mo, I love you. Peace.
Big Mike.
Yeah, just want to say for the record that Kwame Nkrumah said, I am not African because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me. I think we should all be proud that we were able to go to the Million Man March where so much love and such a great feeling of togetherness and unity occurred. So again, I salute the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan for calling all of us together. Black man, Black woman, protect the Black child, accept your own, and be yourself.
All right. I have to thank my loving sisters, Sharon and Darlene, for watching the show and always giving me calls and critiquing. We appreciate you guys. Leader family, Graves family, Veronica Kitt, phenomenal job. Big D, Nat Woods, Sheila Berry, everyone that does so much to get this show off the ground. And we got to thank our studio audience, which is through YouTube right now, YouTube Live. Got to thank Jazz Explorer, everyone that's watching, everybody that's part of this, Clark Wars News, everyone that's watching. Keep watching. We'll try to keep giving you good shows. We appreciate your comments. Like Noel said, click on to YouTube, sign up, become members of watching our show, and we'll see you guys again. All right. As Noel always says, one time.
Peace.
See you next week.